This is TWiT.
Let's talk a little bit about the self-publishing thing. I kind of think there are some parallels really between self-publishing and open source, but I want to find out from you, how did you get started on that? Because the conventional wisdom, of course, is that self-publishing is bad. You're never going to make any money by just putting stuff out there on your own.
Yeah, the reality is you're not going to make money through art, no matter how you go about it. It's you know, I worked in a bookstore for years, and I saw how many New York Times bestsellers came to our bookstore and gave talks and would talk to me about their day job, and I was shocked to learn just how few people make a living writing. So I think we should be honest about the chances of making a living with any form of art. The beauty of self-publishing is that you know, a lot of books get turned down at publishers because there's no place to shelve them at a bookstore. It's too between genres, or editors are sick of a certain genre and they think it's tired and it's done. But there's new readers coming up all the time, and I think readers have a more voracious appetite for books than publishing output. So self-publishing has flourished for thousands of writers because there's a bigger demand than there is output from publishing houses, especially in certain genres. So yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities between open source and self-publishing. And in fact, I think what self-publishing is doing is getting back to the root of storytelling, which was a very communal endeavor. It was not one person sitting in some corner of a cave alone, coming up with a story whole cloth and presenting it in a way that it can never be changed or edited and would stand you know, as like an edifice for all of time. The way story developed was through an interaction between the storyteller and the audience, and audience members would memorize the story, embellish it, make changes, and retell it later. And this is how you know, the Iliad, the Odyssey, this is even how a lot of our religious texts were put together. So it's a great old tradition. The novel is something that's kind of new, and I think not as interesting. And what we're seeing with fan fiction, with wiki novels, with stories on Wattpad, where you have a lot of interaction between the audience and the storyteller, that gets back to the root of how we told stories, which was collaboratively and in a very open source kind of hacker maker manner.
Do you incorporate any of that into your work? Are you getting feedback from your audience as you're writing, or are you putting things out there before you officially hit the button and publish things? Or
yeah, my best-selling work, Wool, was published in parts. So they came out every 3 or 4 weeks. It was very much like Dickens released a lot of his novels, and Dickens read the reviews and read what people were saying in the newspapers. You know, people were waiting on he invented the cliffhanger. It was a very literal cliffhanger. But people waited anxiously for each installment of his work. And he also, which I think people don't appreciate enough, is when he published these in a compiled novel, he actually made slight changes to the work. So it wasn't exactly just compressing the stories together and releasing them as a novel. He modified them again. And, you know, Shakespeare, I'm sure, took into account the reaction from the audience, like what jokes were killing and which ones weren't, and used that to modify future stories, maybe even the stories that we've come to know and love. So I liken it to performing live as a musician in front of an audience. I think it's much more beneficial to have that feedback and know what sets work and which sets don't, and what they're calling for in an encore. To not use that seems less artistic to me than the idea of, you know, what I think as an artist is the only true way, and if the audience doesn't get it, you know, they shouldn't be a part of it. I see that attitude with a lot of writers, and it's a very modern attitude. It's not who we are as storytellers.